Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's special webinar presentation hosted by Out of the Box Technology featuring Fran Metrics. My name is Jennifer Darachuk, and I will be your moderator today. I am the marketing manager here at Out of the Box Technology. Just a few housekeeping items before we dive in. This session is being recorded, so we will share that out with you later today. If you wanted to rewatch anything, revisit any of the topics that are discussed. Additionally, if you have questions as we are going through the content, you can go ahead and use the chat box there on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be sure to address your questions at the appropriate time. So we appreciate your engagement. And a little bit about Out of the Box Technology. If you haven't joined us before, maybe we're new to you or it has been a while, we are anything and everything QuickBooks. So we have a whole team of certified QuickBooks professionals who are trained on the entire family of QuickBooks products from desktop to online and everything in between, as well as the great automation and third-party products that integrate and sync with QuickBooks, and one of those we're going to touch on today. So we also do data services, accounting services, and then training, integration, and support surrounding all of that. So without further ado, I would like to hand things over to our guest presenter today. I have Jason from Fran Metrics. He's the co-founder of this fantastic company with a great solution for franchise systems. And so I'm sure that's why you're here today. So welcome. I will not take up any more fresh air and give things over to Jason.
Hello, thank you guys for joining me today. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Let me know if you can see it. Can you see it, Jennifer?
Looks great.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks to you. Thank you for providing the graphics. So today I'm excited to talk about how best practices in measuring franchise performance data. And so it's not about just selling my product or pushing anything on you. It's really to understand how things have changed and how some best practices can really help you collect that data and support your franchise owners. So that's kind of the goal of this. So I'm going to go into this. First of all, my name is Jason West-McReynolds. I'm a certified franchise executive. I've been in the franchise industry for over 25 years with multiple franchisors. I've also been a QuickBooks user for 30 years, which really ages me, I know, but I've been on the number side of things. I've been on the number side of things in franchising for quite some time. That's why we developed Fran Metrics, is because we realized as technology grew, there's a better way. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is just a better way to actually get the kind of data that you need to help support franchise owners. The whole idea is, when I was first in the franchise industry, a lot of things were very reactive. Franchisors didn't have data. They didn't have financial data. They certainly only heard about things when a franchise owner would say, hey, I'm having a problem, come help me. So today we're going to really talk about how we can streamline this and actually better help support franchise operators. And obviously there's other reason to get this data for disclosure documents and for the item 19 of the financial performance representations, which is a whole other aspect. I realize data is important for the operational support side, but it's also for the sales team is super important as well now. And I'm going to talk about how that switched a little bit, but I'm going to keep it mostly to the support side. So today what we're going to cover is basically the level of requirements. So the first time we're talking about bookkeeping, because bookkeeping itself and why we partner with Out of the Box is that before data comes into any system, it's got to be correct and consistent. And previously that wasn't necessarily happening. There was no real enforcement behind this. And so now we're going to talk about the levels of requirements that you can put on the franchise owners and how to get them to buy in. We'll talk about that later. We're going to talk about building good systems and guides to make it easy for them to be compliant and so forth. And then we're going to talk about ways to make things consistent, across there. So automation is important. The guides that we already talked about a little bit. The technology integrations, right? Standard chart of accounts, banking rules, all those kinds of things, underpinnings of the system that will actually make everything operate in a consistent manner. Compliance when it comes to like what we're going to put in the FDD and in the franchise agreement, because there's the old way to do things and the new ways to do things, and the new things requires a little bit more heavy-handedness from the franchisor, but for the franchisee's own good. And so we just got to let them understand that this is not for you, it's for them, right? It's to help provide better support for them. And then we're going to look at how we make that data actionable. We're going to actually show how we at Fran Metrics use that data and how we're able to help franchisors support their franchise owners with the data. So that's the last piece we're going to cover. And I'll be just doing a quick demo there. So if you haven't, I know some people on here have already seen the demo, but for those that didn't, I'm going to make it real quick. So, and then after that, we can stick around for questions. Okay, so first thing I want to talk is about that shift I kind of brought up before that happened in technology. And so I'm really talking about how it affected franchising. But 15, 20 years ago, when I was at the IFA and we were in the franchise and I was trying to figure out, hey, how do I get the financials from the franchise owners, right? How can we get those? Well, even the biggest brands across the best well-ran franchise systems, only 40% of franchisees submitted to their franchise or their financials. 40%, and this is system-wide average. And the only way it was done was they emailed a PDF or a spreadsheet or something like that. There was no automation, right? And because of that, only about 25% of franchisors back in that time had any financial performance representation in their item 19 because they could not get that data. So, and units would close, and I'm talking specifically with franchise systems I was with, is because of poor performance of those owners, because they didn't even know franchisees were having problems, right? They would, in the system I was with, we'd like, I haven't made money in 4 months, and we'd be like, we didn't know you weren't even making money. And how crazy is that for a franchise owner not to tell the franchisor? But it happens, because if you're in a good system and most franchise operators are making a lot of money, well, they're embarrassed, right? They can blame themselves, and they're like embarrassed by it, so they don't want to tell anybody until it's too late. So this is the kind of thing that was happening when there was a low compliance rate. Now, of course, everybody had in their franchise agreement that you must send in the financials, but franchisors tend to pick their battles with the franchisees, and things like customer service and operations are very important. And so we rarely get to like, hey, where's my P&L for last month? That's usually kind of at the bottom of the barrel, and it shouldn't be, but understandably it is, because that's just not front of mind, and that's not things that are being brought up online or things like that. Nobody brings that up, but you can see a bad review. You can go to your field visits and notice something really wrong. So there's always things to deal with that you will see no matter what, and those get dealt with, and the financials don't. Okay, so then I don't know exactly the date, but it's happened slowly over the last 5 to 10 years. Everything started shifting to the cloud, and so QuickBooks Online, and that's just one. There's other bookkeeping companies, so I don't want to. We integrate with QuickBooks Online, and they're the biggest one, so I do tend to use them. Out of the box is all QuickBooks Online. I'm QuickBooks Online. They're the biggest supplier of bookkeeping software. They made a massive shift, and they still are, of getting people off desktop version to their cloud version. And there's a whole new opportunity to share data and automate once everything's online and cloud-based, where you can push and pull information, log in remotely to the system when it's not physically some software sitting on your computer that you download. And since POS systems and CRM systems, and like my reporting system for Fran Metrics that we have is all cloud-based too, they can talk to each other 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, automatically. You don't need to push a button, you don't need to load your computer. And this revolutionized the way we collect data, right? It changed everything. And so now we can create API solutions, which is basically the thing that connects one system to another. It allows two computer systems, cloud-based systems, to talk to each other. And now that that's happened, a lot of people have been shifting, and data collection has been a lot easier. And so our solution is just set to take advantage of that, and you should take advantage of it regardless if you use out of the box or Fran metrics, although of course we would love to have you use us, but at the same time, you got to take advantage of this either way, because you're going to be left in the dust if you don't. Now instead of 25% of franchisors having item 19, 75%. And that's just a measuring stick. That just shows more and more franchisors are getting data. And now if you don't have a good item 19, in fact, they're not just getting, it's not just the percentage of people putting item 19 data in their FTD, it's the quality of the data, it's the detail of the data. Used to just be top line revenue. Now it's either EBITDA, or they're putting more costs in there because they're tracking this stuff. And so not only do you say, oh, I did good, I have an item 19. Well, how far into it can we go now? What kind of story can we tell? Because now we have better data. And so even though this is about franchise support, the same stuff that would make somebody want to buy into a franchise is the same things you can use to help support franchisees who are struggling. It's the same stuff. So it's very important. And now we know when a franchise owner is struggling, and we can coach and do that proactively instead of reactively, right? So this is a cool thing to have. Let me move on to the next slide here. I think I've covered that pretty well. Okay, so I already talked about the benefits because I just kind of went on with that last slide. But anyway, you will get higher franchise sales, better disclosure, as long as the item 19 looks good. We talked about losing the risk of losing units because you don't even know they have a problem. High revenue per unit because you're now coaching to low revenue units, hopefully in the right way. And the other cool thing is you have better insight about who's more profitable based on subsets of units, because like our system, for example, we can compare how profitable a unit is from one state to the other state or a geographical area, or if you can find out if hand-on owners are really doing good and hands-off owners aren't doing so well, or multi-unit owners are doing well, then you can put your focus more into the kind of owners or in the area where you have the most profit or the most sales. So you can actually get some predictive data on where to open units, and it's super powerful. Again, none of this could be done, not at a reasonable basis, not with as much data as we can get now, right? The prior method would only get you 40% of the units, and to figure out something like that, you need a lot of units reporting. So that's another big advantage. Okay, so now I want to kind of back up a little bit and talk about the foundation. Because before we can make any of this possible, we have to make sure the underpinnings work of it, and we need to make sure there's that consistency. So even though I talked about automation and technology and it'll all just take care of itself, well, that's not really true. The truth is once it's set up, the technology you can hand it off to the technology, but you need the consistency, right? And the consistency is only going to come if you have systems in place and basically a method. And so the first thing we need, because the books are so important, everything starts with the books, we need a guide. We need a bookkeeping guide. In the same way, it's one of the last things that people think about in a franchise system. If you go to your operation manual, if there's not a guide on how to do bookkeeping, you need it. Even if you have a mandated bookkeeper, they need it, right? They need it. You need a system where things are being put in consistently. Because if we have a saying, garbage in, garbage out. Our reporting is only good as the bookkeeping or the data that we're pulling in. And if that's wrong, that's wrong. And if you allow your franchise owners to do books, then of course it's going to be all over the place. And so you got to have it, and you got to stick to it, and you got to enforce it. Otherwise, you could. And the real problem is you could get in legal jeopardy, right? If you put figures in item 19 that are based on different bookkeeping methods, you're not putting in there a reasonable basis, which is required for item 19. Okay, and then so we need the guide, we need to train on the guide, we need to check it up. And then we need to implement those integrations. And so if you have a POS system or a CRM system, I highly recommend you use one that integrates directly with QuickBooks. But if you don't, build one. You can build one. As long as they have what's called an open API, which we talked about, that's the thing that makes technology connect together. Fran Metrics, we've actually helped build, besides our reporting system, we've helped build API connections. And that will automate a lot of the stuff, especially the revenue side and the sales side of things. You can automate a good 50% of the bookkeeping. And that's a real, for consistency, that's really important. And then the last part that I'm going to talk here is about how a little bit more granular, more detailed. But every operation manual, or pretty much everyone, has a standard chart of accounts, right? They have the vendor list, they have the products and services. Well, putting that in a list in your operation manual is not really doing anything because it's buried with a lot of stuff. Technically, you should have, before the franchise owner even touches it, all those things already loaded into their QuickBooks, right? I mean, I'd rather it not be in the operational and just in their QuickBooks, because then they're going to categorize stuff. They're going to have things automated within their QuickBooks. So when banking rules, just to cover that a little bit, that recognizes bank transactions based on what they are. So if a franchise owner, for example, is paying you for royalties and it's coded a certain way for the bank, it'll automatically post to their QuickBooks as royalties, and it'll post into the account that you uploaded with the other standard chart of accounts. So even the expenses can be automated if you do this. And don't expect a list of the chart of account, a vendor list, and a product list to turn into QuickBooks. If they tried to manually enter all those in, it would take hours. If they tried to do all this, it would take hours and hours and hours. But if you set up one correctly and downloaded those spreadsheets from QuickBooks and just uploaded it for the new system, they'd already be there for them. So you're really helping the franchise owners, and you're making this foundation for consistency. So if you're not doing it, I highly recommend it. And if you need help, you can reach out to me and I can help you with that. But those are 4 lists that you can import into QuickBooks Online before any transactions come in to automate the actual bookkeeping itself. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to talk about having a mandated bookkeeper. And I'm not telling you you need to have one, and I'm going to talk about the different levels of mandation of what you can mandate. But I am going to talk about what the advantages are, because it's a lot. It's a lot, right? First of all, you'll have a consistent bookkeeping method. You have one group that's doing the books. You have a single contact to hold accountable. Try holding 50 different accountants that are employed by your franchise owners, not by you, accountable to do bookkeeping right? Or your franchise owner themselves. It's so hard to do, and it's so important. So that can be problematic. And it avoids bad or incomplete bookkeeping. Because so I talked about bad data coming into our system when we're trying to show reporting, but sometimes books are behind 2 months, and that's even worse. Right now they're throwing everything off. Everything's just zeros, and it's throwing off all the benchmarking. Ability to track reliable franchise performance, obviously that goes hand in hand. It can fulfill reporting requirements of the franchisees. I'm going to talk about that a little later, but there are requirements within every franchise agreement, which you know that franchisees must submit financials. Now we can automate those based on having this system in place. Provides value to the franchise owners based on pricing, right? Somebody doing your books for system-wide, and they're doing a bunch of them, are going to build systems and have a knowledge of the books. They're going to spend half the time that just somebody, imagine a bookkeeper sitting there doing bookkeeping, and they have a bookkeeping company, and they're doing bookkeeping for 500 clients that are all different businesses, all different industries. I mean, I'm sure there's some commonality, but you get the point. They're not experts in your books. Where if you have a bookkeeper doing all of them, I mean, it's going to be simple and quick, and they don't have to relearn the whole thing. And so the pricing can typically be based on that. And you'll get the franchisee set up correctly from the beginning, and then have that reasonable basis that we talked about for item 19. And sometimes you can work in rebates or negotiate for the franchisor. If you have books or things to be done, you have a lot more pull with a company that's mandated. Anyway, okay, so now I'm going to talk about the different levels of requirements that I have seen in FDDs, and I'm going to talk the first one that is on here is the old school way. It's the one that still most franchise systems have, and it's based on the fact that it's just based on the fact that it's how it has always been, and so it's kind of the way it is now. And then a lot of franchise attorneys just kind of like copy paste old language in, or don't have the understanding of the number side. They're all about reducing liability and legal issues. So even some of the best franchise attorneys are going to go, okay, this is what we always done, right? You have to use our standard chart of accounts, and you have to submit P&Ls. It's garbage. I mean, it works, but not very well at all. Okay, and then there's the strict one. Then there's the middle one, right? This is kind of the middle ground. The mandated use of a bookkeeper for a set amount of time. This is one I've seen where the franchisor is kind of saying, you know, we have a problem here with the books. Let's at least get the bookkeeper we approved, at least get them going for a year, which is pretty typical. And then they can take it from here if they want to, and hopefully by that time they just are used to having the bookkeeper do it. They keep them, but then it's a way of saying, yeah, we're going to make you do it, but not forever, kind of deal. So it's kind of like, I don't want to go too far and say you have to use them forever. So it's kind of a weird middle ground. And then the mandated bookkeeper, right? That's the one where, yeah, you have to use our bookkeeper just the whole time. Okay. And again, some franchisors don't want to do it because it seems really too big brother-ish, heavy-handed. And you're already telling the franchise owner to do all this other stuff, and now you're just adding something that doesn't seem, from their perspective, it might seem like, I don't get why you would have to do it. And of course, we'd want to explain why it could be an advantage to them. And then there's other requirements. So these can be in combination or with the other ones, or one-offs, whatever, but requiring you use a specific software like QuickBooks Online. That's super popular now because nothing will work that we've talked about if everybody's on different software, for the most part. That's not entirely true, but it makes it a lot easier. And in the same way, you can support franchisees or franchise owners that are all using the same POS system, because you know the POS system, and if there's some one-off glitch, you have somebody who has the answer. No different than the bookkeeping, right? If somebody's bookkeeping way of doing bookkeeping is you've seen the problem before and you've been able to solve it with QuickBooks Online, and they're using something else like Xero, you may not be able to support them or understand what's going on. So there's no difference there. Or your bookkeeper, somebody would, at least from your thing, know how to deal with that situation. So it's a really good idea to do. And then connect to a reporting software solution. And yeah, that's something like me, right? Brand Metrics, that's something that's requires them to share that data with a third party, so you can consolidate and benchmark it, support the franchisees, create item 19s, right? And I misspelling there, but it should say bookkeeping file and setup and training, so that they have to go through a training, pay for the training, and have that QuickBooks set up. Like I mentioned earlier, uploading all those CSV files and having that ready to go for them. Okay, so so this is kind of going over that again, but just a couple things to talk about here. Obviously, with the FDD and a franchise agreement, if you update it, you change it, they only work going forward. So there's a slow roll in, and you still have to get, even though you have to, you have to want to get everybody on board to do this. It's gonna be tough. You have to wait for, sometimes if you don't have a way to do it, you're gonna have to wait for the franchise agreement to expire and renew, and then it's still gonna be difficult to want the franchise owners to do it, even though they're required to. And again, we can mandate the vendor for books, at least temporarily, if not forever, mandate QuickBooks Online, allow for data to be shared, and then we'll have the new reporting system that we want in place. So none of these are not necessarily easy, unless you're a brand new franchisor. If you're new, you can get this going right off the gate. If you have a lot of legacy franchises, it can be a little difficult. And then we'll talk about how to get buy-in and stuff in just a second here. The franchisor must disclose any mandated service that imposes any costs required of the franchisor. So that's the big thing we're talking about, where we need to get buy-in. When they sign the new franchise agreement, though, they'll have to follow it. And I already talked about the minimum of a year, kind of the middle ground. I just kind of reiterated that there because that is now kind of the big thing to do. Although I personally don't mind having a bookkeeper for the whole time. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how to get buy-in from existing franchise owners. This is the toughest thing to do, but it is very, very important, and it's something that takes some time and effort. I'm not going to lie. I do believe it's better. I do believe that it's better for them as well. So the first thing we got to do is show them the benefits of the new system. They have to realize that the franchisor put this together for not just them, but for other franchise owners as well, right? It's something that that other people are going to invest in. New franchisees are going to be required to do it. They need to be a team player. You'll be able to see how you stack up against other owners. The reporting is coming to you as well. It's not just for us. And you should want to know how you're doing. You should want to be improving. And now we can do that because we're not just asking you, we're asking everybody. Some people could be against this, and I'm not saying you should do it, but what I have seen some franchisors do is say, hey, you're going to have to do this when you renew your franchise agreement anyway. We could reduce your franchise fee, your renewal fees by 20% or 50% if you sign up now and allow us to collect your data and sign on to this new system. That's one way to do it. Building it into a technology fund, the cost of it, so you're not imposing the cost on the franchise owner. So it's, hey, it's a free system, okay? It can automate and replace existing reporting requirements. I kind of brought this up before, but this is a real big one. They're technically required to send a financial statements in already. That's a requirement, I guarantee it. But you can say, hey, if you sign up for Fran Metrics or another reporting platform, you don't have to do that anymore. You just have to keep your books up to date. We can see your bookkeeping, so don't even bother. But just so you know, in case you're not enforcing it, we're going to enforce that, right? We're going to start enforcing you sending us your P&L statement now because we need it. But if you don't want to do it, sign up for Fran Metrics. And of course, getting your FAC involved, the Franchise Advisory Committee or Council, if you have one, which is typically a group of franchise owners that have some feedback. Get a system in front of them, explain that to them, spend some more time with them. If you can get them on board, it'll hopefully get other, and that goes for anything, as anybody knows, if you're trying to get any new system, products, advertising, but technology as well. Get the FAC involved, and then explain about how we can make the books consistent. We can do a lot of stuff for you. So anyway, next thing I have here for you is just kind of an animation of like the old way versus the new way. So the old way is send financials in. The new way is you just have them at your fingertips. It's automated. Manual reporting, spreadsheets, reporting on demand. We already talked about the old way is reactive. Franchisors will typically wait until there's an issue before they react or review a P&L. Even if you had 100%, imagine if you had 100% compliance and you had 150 units and you had 150 P&L statements in front of you every month. What would you actually do with them, right? You probably wouldn't do anything unless somebody said something, then you might pull it up. But the new way is proactive. You'll see and be identified of issues as they happen, and you can support franchisees before they ask for it. So it's very helpful. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about best practices in actually looking at the data. So now that we've collected and got the data in an automatic way, how do we do it? So I'm a big believer that P&L statements are not the best way to look at data as a franchisor. Now, are they important? Sure. And should the franchise owners review P&Ls? Yeah. I'm not saying that they're garbage, but the Fran Metrics there, when we really went through this process, scorecards were much better method, and I'll be showing one here shortly. So scorecards basically show the numbers in the way they were meant to be looked at, and they show, well, I'm going to show it, so I'm not going to go into too much, but we only want to show certain, we only want to show certain things in the scorecard. We don't want to show everything. We only want to show figures that are actionable and that can be coached to, right? And only things that are important. So it's kind of, our saying is they have to be actionable, they have to be important, and they have to be accurate. That's what should be on a scorecard, right? So things like that. My point in here on the first comment is, do we need rent on the scorecard? No. I mean, what's the action? Not to pay rent? That's ridiculous. Of course, we want our franchise owners to pay rent, right? So we're not going to put that on the scorecard typically. Now, some of our clients want it on there, and we can put it on there for sure. But is that what I consider best practice? No. I mean, we're going to show their profitability, so we're going to count that as an expense, but the actual expense itself, I don't think is. P&Ls only have lagging indicators, not leading indicators. And one of my people I work with has a really good saying: if it ends up on the P&L, it's too late, right? That's you've already shown bad figures on your P&L. Why are we looking at data that's reaction that's old? So those are lagging indicators. Like, what we want to have is some leading indicators. So we bring in other information. Again, I talked a lot about bookkeeping and I talked a lot about books, but we can also pull other data into a scorecard. It's not just financial data. We want to pull operational data. We want to pull Google review data, right? If it's a restaurant, we want to do service speed times. If it's a gym, we want to know how many trial memberships converted to actual memberships, conversion rates. How well is the franchise owner doing things in their business that would make them profitable, right? And those things will end up landing on the P&L, and we want some P&L items on there as well. But we want leading indicators, not lagging indicators. So anyway, pretty obvious there. And then P&Ls basically can be misleading. In other words, they're going to have owner discretionary costs, they're going to have depreciation, they're going to have interest costs, things that are not operational costs. And we can have a franchise owner showing that they lost money when they might actually be doing okay. I mean, what's the end goal of a P&L when it comes tax time, right? It's to show we didn't make very much money, right? But as a friend, so it's always in the best interest of a franchise owner to write off everything they can, and in a way that doesn't necessarily show their actual profit. So what we can do is we can subtract everything that's non-operational and show what operational profit is and have that as a thing. But just going to a P&L, you can't really do that. You just go to the bottom line and then, oh my gosh, and then if you want to figure it out, you got to go back through it. So that's not really good. That's another reason. And again, I already mentioned this kind of before with the leading and lagging indicators, is it's not showing you all the crucial data. So we can also bring in stuff from like the POS system and like I mentioned before, Google reviews and stuff. So that's it for that. So so other best practices, I already talked about the first one. I just kind of I already went into the specifics when I was talking, but that's why I put it on this chart. Then obviously we want industry specific data. We can help. All right. I already talked about the operational thing. Again, I went into the details in the last screen and I guess put them on here. So I don't really have to go in this, but if you get a copy of this, I send this out, you'll have it on here. It'll be on the recording to see it. Oh, but the last thing on here I didn't cover, don't put so many KPIs. Well, you can do what you like. Best practices, don't put everything on there, right? What's the most important to your company? What are the kinds of things that you want your company to be recognized for? This is when your like core values and your core focuses come into play. What are the indicators that really represent what your company is about, and have those be the focus? Don't put everything on there. If the saying is if everything's important, then nothing's important, right? So with that, I'm going to, the next slides I have are actually some of the reporting we have, but I'm going to actually, instead of showing screenshots, I'm just going to actually, the screenshots will be on this slide, but I'm going to actually go in and load up our reporting. So as long as it's actionable, as long as it's going, I'm going to have to relog in because it's got the security time me out. All right. So again, I don't want to use this as like a sales pitch, so that's not my goal, but I just at least want to show you what we've been able to do with this data once we've collected it. This is a demo company. So I select something on the map, you see we branded it, we can go in and I'll show you a scorecard. That's just a dummy site here, so we have to go back to where we loaded some data in here. So the first thing you'll notice on the scorecard, what we can do is we can actually see the result and then see how it stacks up against the median result of all reporting units, right? And by the way, we can change the date pretty easily, and we can change the benchmark. I can change it to average, right? And I can change it to the goal. I can actually change it to whatever you as the franchisor set up for the goal for this thing. But median's always other best practice for statistical benchmarking. Median is always the best, okay? That we can change this default to anything you'd like, but median is the best because if there's a couple real bad outliers, they affect the average, but not the median. But you can see this particular unit is green, which means the result is more favorable than the median, except for the labor costs, they're a little low. We rank them so you can see how they're ranked, and it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 units, 100 units, or 10 units. And we had to make fake data, so we only made it for 8 units. You can see exactly on these KPIs how they ranked amongst all other units. And then here we have the comparative period. Right now it's set to the same month prior year, which is the best practice for somebody who is seasonal. Like if your business is seasonal, you want it set to this. But as a default, we can set it to show prior month. If you're not seasonal, we just rather show if you're doing better or worse than last month. This trend shows you how we're comparing to the prior month. So now we can see how we did compared to everybody, how we did compared to how we were used to be doing, if we're going up or down in our KPIs, and then the 3-month rolling averages. You can see here we brought in Google reviews, we brought in POS data, but we brought in financial data as well, a 3-month rolling average. And then the cool part is, for the way we have it set up, is that we can actually compare with similar type units. So if I was this franchise owner and I was like, okay, my labor seems really high, but I'm in New York and I'm comparing myself with people in Kansas, so I think I should be high. Well, you can come up here and say, okay, well, compare me only with units within my state. And now you see we're only comparing to 4 units, where before we were comparing to 8, so now just the 4 within their state. And you can see they're still not great on labor. Their labor's a little off still. So we can do it by whatever subset you want. We also can do it by we can also compare based on capacity issues, like number of suites. This is a spa, so within the spa they may have multiple suites, and maybe somebody has 4, somebody has 5. If it's a restaurant, it would be tables, number of tables. If it was home service industry, it could be number of trucks or technicians that you have available, and it shows you how efficient they are. And by the way, we can do math with, if the subset's a number that we're dealing with, we can actually do math with that subset. So this is revenue per suite. So this is showing how efficient they are with their particular capacity. We can add an additional month on ours, and we can also download this into a spreadsheet. So I can add a month here, but I do want to get going on to the next one. Trends report. Again, I got to go back to where we have data for everything. And here we can compare 2 KPIs with each other and how they trend through time, so we can see if something's going up or down, or if there's a correlation. Here I'm comparing total revenue to wages as a percentage of revenue, which is the labor cost. But for the whole time period, we also roll up stuff. So from January to September here, I can see my total revenue, labor cost for the whole time. And so if I want to look at a quarter, I could come in here. And of course, we highlight the 2 columns that are in the graph. You can also download this data. The next report, I'm trying to go through this rather quickly. If you want a full demo, let me know. I can go into this in more detail. This is actually one of my favorite reports. This shows what the potential of this franchise could do based on if they fix their problems. Because it's one thing to say, hey, you have a problem with your financials, or your labor's low, or your sales are low. What would it look like if you fixed it? That's where this comes in. So this is a break-even analysis, and on the left we have the graph, and on the right we have the chart. So on the left is interactive, and if I move my cursor left to right, that represents revenue going up. And on the chart on the right, you can see these are the actual results for last month of this unit, and the adjusted results are what are representative of what we're doing on the graph. So if I move my cursor over 10% higher revenue, the difference is how much better the profitability and the cost would be if I raise my revenue 10%. So that's what that does. The black line here on the bottom represents fixed costs. That's overhead, like rent, things that don't change with sales. Like you pay your rent if you sell $1 or $1 million, it's all the same, right? And then we mark the variable cost, which goes up. The red line there represents variable and fixed costs, so it does go up, right? And so the difference between the green line and the red line is what we call operational profit. Now, again, remember, we've removed all those other things out of there, the owner discretionary costs, the interest, the depreciation. This is just operational profit, the difference between those. So I can see what I'd make at different levels, but remember, this particular unit actually had they didn't have a sales problem. They were number 2 out of 8, but they did have a labor cost problem. So over here, I can say, how would this graph look if I had the median labor of all reporting units, right? Well, look, they could make $6,600.15 if their labor was fixed. Now, I'm sure you've all seen financials and said, hey, their labor's higher, their costs are high, and you have this problem like, hey, your labor's high. That's great, but this is more specific, and they can see their new break-even point. There's actually dollars and cents compared to actual other units, instead of just like it's high because we recognize it's high. This is actually benchmark. This is actually using other units figures to actually show them. Like, all we're asking you is to have, if you just got to the median, not the best, just the median, look at, we would lower your break even almost 5,000. Your variable cost would go down 2.5%. And we can also just come down here and enter a labor percentage, right? What if your labor was 50%, right? Which I guess is a little crazy. I guess it just depends on what industry you're in. And of course, there's that whole state excuse that we talked about earlier. I could do this by state and say, what if I had the median of everybody in my state? And you see now it's a little different. So now they can't say, oh, it's because of my state. Okay, so only 2 more quick reports, and then I'll be done with showing you around, and then we can open it up for questions, if there are any. So global reports is only franchisor based, but obviously if you have a ton of units and you want to figure out who's struggling in what category, you can come in here and you can actually, instead of in the other reports where we were showing by unit results, in this one we actually can show the KPIs and then show from most favorable to least favorable who's obviously that one's really high, but the labor costs are a little bit more consistent there. So you can see who's struggling with what KPI all in one page without having to go into each individual scorecard. So basically every data point for every unit is all on this one page. And then in the last report I'm going to show you is the consolidated scorecard. There's a consolidated trend as well, but it's really doesn't behave much differently than the last one, so I don't want to waste any time. But you'll see on the consolidated one, it looks a little different, right? On the consolidated one, we're rolling up numbers. We're not benchmarking in this, although we do show the benchmark, but now we can show the total system-wide revenue for this time period, the total system-wide labor cost of goods sold, all that stuff, right? And we can look at, instead of looking at, hey, show me within your state, I can just select the state as the franchisor. I can say, hey, how are we doing in Texas, right? Our median revenue in Texas and costs in Texas are this. So should we open in Texas, or what about Arizona? Arizona, they're better with their labor, right? Their product costs are higher. So now I can look at, based on any subset, population, number of suites, in this case 4, we have 7, or I can do 2 at the same time. So show me all of Texas has 4 suites, but I could show me all of the units that are in Texas with 4 suites. And so we have all these filtering, and we also can filter by time in operation. That for us, that's coming out in a couple days, but you can say, show me units that were open within 1 year or 2 years or been open for 3 years. So you can see how things are improving over time. Okay, so with that, I am going to go back to my sheet here, and I think I've covered everything I needed to cover, and I can open it up for questions.
Excellent. Jason, thank you so much. I love watching you go through all of this. It is so cool just to see the data that this can develop and give for our franchisors. So thank you so much for going through this today. The first question is, does this work with QuickBooks Desktop or just QuickBooks Online?
So I recommend converting people to QuickBooks Online. Does it work with desktop? Yes, and we have lots of clients. What we do for desktop is we can manually import the P&L. We are a fairly new company. Our technology is only a couple of years old, and QuickBooks has planned to stop supporting QuickBooks Desktop, and they have plans to get rid of it. Although they keep holding off because people are getting frustrated, understandably so. So we didn't want to build an integration that was going to go away. But for people who don't use QuickBooks Online, we have a solution, and we'll map it. And because we didn't build out that integration, we have a way to just download the P&L and upload it. But that's the reason we didn't do it. Others that have been around longer have done it, but ours is at least built on a new technology. But the answer is we can make it work, but you got to understand desktop isn't on the cloud. And so the integration they have that works with it is less reliable, and it requires people to be online, and it has to be managed. And there's just more possibilities for it not to work correctly or send the data or be missing data. Like our system uploads every day, right? And corrects old issues and syncs the data, and it happens automatically overnight when we're all sleeping. So that's something that can only be done on the cloud. So I know that was a long-winded answer and probably not what you wanted to hear, but the QuickBooks Online is kind of the way of the future, and it just is the way it is. And that's coming from QuickBooks too, not just me. So that's just it's the way it is.
And an honest answer is the best answer. So we do appreciate that. Can you talk about, if we have a franchisor on the line who says, yeah, this sounds great, what does that timeline look like? Could they be up and running by March 1? We're at the beginning of February here. Like, how long does this take to kind of implement and get going?
That's a fantastic question. So it really depends on, we talked about all those underpinnings and systems that should be in place. It depends on how well it's ready to go. And I can have people up and running. My record is like a week and a half. If I had everything I needed and somebody just came to me, I could have it done in a day. But that's, in practice, it can take a couple months, and I want to just set up expectations. Because if you're a big organization, you have to have a handful of franchises you're willing to set up, and we'll typically set it up so you can see your data, figure out the KPIs. It's not complicated though. That's the thing, is like our system isn't complicated. It's more of just getting the ability to connect, get the connections connected that we need, because it's got to be on a per unit basis, right? But once they're connected and it's going, it's easy. So if you have a bunch, I mean, if a system has a bunch of franchise owners and a bunch of company-owned units that are just ready to go, and they said, yeah, I mean, I'll get them connected tomorrow, we can get it done real quick, right? So it changes, yeah. Sure. But if we have to build a custom API out, that'll take a couple months. And what I mean by custom API is if we want to like bring in data from like your POS system or something like that, that's a little bit more sophisticated. But we have a QuickBooks review integration So a Google review integration, a QuickBooks integration. We have a couple other integrations, and we have data uploads where if you have a good enterprise system, we can upload POS data, and we do that for most of our clients actually. So we just say, hey, just give us some reports from your POS system that shows the performance by unit. We'll just upload it via a spreadsheet. So that can happen right away.
Great, thank you. The next one is, you may have touched on this already and I missed it, but do you have a set list of KPIs that we can start with, or do we have to come up with our own?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. We have a set list based on the industry you're in. There's always a few, right? If you're selling stuff, we always have cost of goods sold. If you're home service, we always have labor. So labor is a percentage of revenue, cost of goods sold as a percentage of items sold, revenue, operational profit, Google review score. If you get lots of Google reviews, we can do that automatically. There's a good 7 or 8 that we come up with. I always recommend keeping it less than 20. So we're a third or a halfway there. And the rest we can talk through any of them because we've set up enough companies that I feel like we can offer suggestions. But think about if you're coaching your franchise, think about if you're about ready to go meet a franchise owner to coach them or to suggest something to them. What kind of numbers would you want to see? And then can we get access to them? That's what we really want in there, right?
Sure, absolutely, makes sense. Sometimes it's easier too if you have a list to start with and then the franchisor can say, add and subtract here versus a blank slate and it's a little overwhelming. So that's really great.
Exactly, and that's what we do. We start with a handful and then we develop them, and we can change them at any time. Yeah, great. Nothing's hard coded. Everything can be changed on the fly.
Love that. And then our last question here is about, of course, cost, what this would look like. Do you have kind of like a base fee? Does it really depend on what each system needs? How many locations they have, just how deep this development goes? Or can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So our base, and we're about half the price of our competition. At least for like Quavinci and the other stuff, but I try not to make this a sales thing, but we start at $20 a unit and up to 20 units, then we go all the way down to 12 based on volume, up to 100 units. I do want to say we do partner with Out of the Box. So if Out of the Box does your bookkeeping, right, they just add that onto the bookkeeping cost a little bit, and then the franchise owners end up getting the reporting and just paying for it, and there's no cost to you when you do that. I mean, you have to talk to Out of the Box, and then we bill them directly. So if you work with us together, the franchisor literally doesn't pay for anything except for the units they connect that Out of the Box doesn't handle. So there's that option, but it's pretty affordable. It's reasonable, and it comes with all the integrations and the setup and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would say if you are currently using us at Out of the Box Technology for your bookkeeping, which I do believe several people on this line are, I would say to have a conversation with either the Ellen or Patricia or whoever it is that you are working with on our side, and they'll make sure to get you taken care of and kind of get you in the best place possible.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
All right, and it looks like we have a fan on the line, Jason. One of our attendees says, great platform, Jason. Just wanted to say I love using Fran metrics every day. The ease of use, insightful data, and excellent support. Truly a valuable tool as a franchisor. So thank you so much. Wow. That was Lee who chatted in. So really great testimony. I know we're hearing that on our side as well from those who use your system. We're working on a case study. So it really is a great solution for a growing franchise. And just as an owner, as a franchisor, to really know what all of your systems are looking like, how they're performing, and how to make them all successful. So I echo that.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, and feel free. My email is jason@franmetrics.net. Pretty simple, or you can just go to franmetrics.net, and there's a button on the site if you want to get a demo. again, either way, but if you want to see it in more detail, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I said, if you're already working with us at Out of the Box, you can talk to your salesperson here and get connected, and we'll make sure that you get set up with the solution. So Jason, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. And thanks to everyone on the line who took the hour out of their day. Hopefully you had a nice lunch if you're over on the East Coast with me. And listening to this and really diving in. So thank you. And Jason, we'll definitely be in conversation as we continue to grow this, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Yes, thank you.